I remember thinking that, like, where's God in this? Like, I know that it felt so right at one time.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like a God thing. You know, you would think if anybody's rock solid, it would be your pastors and your leaders. And while we were still leading on the outside, we were torn up on the inside, and we had doubt, and we were scared to death. So 1999, we got married. I was 18.
We were young. I think at probably the 5-year mark, we started trying to have kids. And after a couple years into it, realized, okay, this is not going to be as easy as we planned. Or
a few of our friends started getting pregnant, and they were having kids, and eventually we were pretty much the only couple from our age group that hadn't had kids yet, so we were like way behind the game.
A lady was talking to me saying, hey, I realize that y'all don't have any kids. I have a friend who just adopted through the foster system. You should check that out.
We had some friends that actually had kind of gone before us, and they were kind of examples for us, and they helped in our student ministry, and they were foster parents. They had fostered like 18 kids.
Yeah, they were temporary foster parents. And so they just said, hey, we're gonna just scout it out for you. So I was like, thank you, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's how we ended up meeting Brooklyn.
Right.
Is they took Brooklyn in, and they said, hey, you've got to meet this kid. We met Brooklyn for the first time at church, and she was adorable, like the cutest thing, 5 years old. And like you could tell she was, I guess, needy for a 5-year-old. Like they were holding her like a baby kind of, and she just wanted to be held a lot. So we could tell like there was a great need for a good family for her.
They were holding hands and walking out of church, and in the parking lot, she told Brooklyn, she said, you know that couple that you just met, they don't have any kids. And she said, I have a great idea. Maybe I could be their little girl and they could be my mommy and daddy. We had gone on to Tennessee on vacation, and she's texting me all this, and I'm just crying like, oh my goodness, is this really happen? Is this child really, choosing us?
It seemed like right from the beginning, no doubt you're going to be able to keep Brooklyn. And that's kind of like how they sold us on it, I guess.
Yeah.
Is this kid is coming from a family situation that's terrible.
They said she has no relatives.
Yeah. A few months into it, I think it was in the first 9 months, we had gotten the news that all of a sudden there's some family members that stepped in and were interested in taking Brooklyn and her older sister. It's not that we didn't want Brooklyn to be with her family and all that. It was just that like we had gotten attached to her in such a way, like she was our daughter
and
already.
She had gotten attached to us so much so that when when we had to tell her, hey, there's a good possibility that you may be going with these relatives, she was distraught. She was terrified. She lost 10 pounds. And for a 6-year-old, that's pretty traumatic. She had an anxiety attack one night, which is so scary.
I had one night at least where I had to sit on the side of her bed and hold her hand while she was crying herself to sleep, and I was crying as well, trying to be a dad that would console her and make her feel better, and I couldn't do that. I was so heartbroken. I was losing my daughter, and I had to try to make her feel good about it, and I don't want to talk bad about these family members if she was going to be leaving, because they told us there's no situation in which she's going to be able to stay with you guys now. So we had gotten some just bad news by then. But I remember at one point I felt like God was speaking and saying, I'm just stacking up the odds so that I can be seen as a strong God. And that was, I don't know, I mean, I guess it was like encouraging to hear it, but it didn't look like it, it definitely looked like the odds were being stacked up, but I didn't see any hope in it. There was a really interesting missionary who came in town, and he was at the church, and I had met him. I was talking to him about our situation, and you and Brooklyn walked in the room, and I introduced you guys to him, and I introduced you guys as, this is my wife Brooke, and this is my foster daughter Brooklyn. And the guy was very nice, and he met you guys and was very sweet to Brooklyn. And as soon as you guys walked out the room, he turned around and looked at me and he slapped me in the face. And in his Russian sounding voice, he says, "Don't you ever call her foster daughter. How would you like it if God calls you foster son?" And man, it was like, that's an intense message. And it just like broke my heart. And I've never called her foster daughter. I hadn't called her foster daughter anymore, even before things began to change. But it just like reminded me, that like what God sets up, God's gonna complete. What God begins, God's gonna finish.
I just remember the scripture where it says, he gives and he takes away, but blessed be the name of the Lord. And we had sort of positioned our heart that way, that God, we understand that you give and you take away, and we don't always understand why that happens, but we're gonna bless you through it, no matter what. I remember getting a text from the worker that said they changed their mind. So I just texted her back, they changed their mind about what? And she said, they don't want to take Brooklyn in. They've actually turned around and they're heading back home, which was out of state. And they specifically want you guys to be the ones to adopt her. And we were just like, we just stood stunned for a second. And then it was just like a party going down in our house, because we were like, did he just do that?
Yeah, like your mom came over and my mom came over, and we like videoed Brooklyn's response to it.
She was just stunned too. She was almost like, wait, is this really happening? Because she was trying to prepare herself for it. But yeah, it was awesome.
And almost a year later, we adopted Brooklyn this last November of 2014.
It was right short of 2 years that she had been with us.
Yeah.
So
just
to God be the glory.
Yeah, it's just an amazing story of hope in the middle of what was so shaky for us. And we all need this anchor in Jesus. We all need this foundation, because when things get wavy, we don't have the strength in us to make it through anything.
And I know that God, he saw the posture of our heart, but I'm so thankful that he just came through, and that she's ours, and she's been a tremendous blessing.
Yeah.